Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the narrow alleys of New York, winter bit at the skin of the most vulnerable. Hurried passers-by, bundled up in their expensive coats, ignored the pleading glances of hungry children. There, two twins, Emma and Ethan, barely 10 years old, held each other's hands, trembling, and whispered in low voices, "Sir, could you lend us a little money, just to buy some bread?" Their eyes shone with hope and distress, and the sound of their voices tore at the heart of a man whose life had rendered him callous, Richard Hamilton, a billionaire renowned for his ruthless financial empire. At first annoyed by the interruption, he was about to ignore them when a spark struck him. He saw in these children not only hunger, but purity and innocence that money had never been able to buy. Instead of pushing them away, Richard did the unthinkable. He took out his phone, made a few calls, and in less than an hour, transformed the twins' small lives into an unexpected miracle, a safe haven, endless food, and the promise of a future they'd never dared imagine. But it wasn't just about money. Richard decided to adopt them as his protégés, appending his own world of luxury calculated by the heart, and revealing that sometimes the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in compassion and courage. Their eyes met, and in that silent moment, an unbreakable bond was formed, that between two vulnerable souls and a man capable of achieving the impossible. The winter wind blew through the narrow alleys of Manhattan, cutting the faces of the hurried passers-by. 10-year-old twins Emma and Ethan clutched their thin blankets, trying to protect themselves from the bitter cold. Their stomachs groaned, and their hope dwindled with every step. They arrived in front of a small bakery, their eyes fixed on the golden loaves steaming outside the window. But they didn't have a cent. Trembling, they approached the sidewalk, and Ethan whispered, if only someone could help us, just a little bread." At that moment, a man in a dark suit stepped out of his black limousine. Richard Hamilton, a billionaire with a cold and implacable reputation, walked confidently, absorbed in his financial thoughts. But the sound of Ethan's voice made him look up. The twins looked at him with fear mixed with hope. Emma spoke, her voice almost breaking. "Sir, could you lend us some money, just to buy some bread?" Richard stopped, surprised. Usually, he ignored the pleas of the needy. But something in their eyes, the innocence, the distress, and above all, the unbreakable bond between them, made his stony heart waver. He knelt before them, his luxurious cloak mingling with the icy breath of winter, and whispered, "I think I can do better than just a loan." The twins blinked in disbelief. Richard pulled out his phone and, with a few quick calls, began to weave the threads of a future they could never have imagined. That night, for Emma and Ethan, the impossible began to become real. Richard Hamilton returned to his limousine, phone in hand. Every call he made seemed ordinary to him, but what he was planning would turn the twins' lives upside down. He contacted a support organization for homeless children, requested social reports, and in the blink of an eye, arranged a safe haven for Emma and Ethan, complete with food, warm clothing, and school support. Meanwhile, the twins stood on the sidewalk, incredulous. They didn't dare believe that a mere billionaire could care about them. Emma whispered to her brother, "Do you think he'll really help us?" Ethan nodded, but his heart was beating too fast for him to speak. A black car pulled up in front of them. Richard got out, smiling genuinely for the first time. "Come up," he said softly. "You won't have to worry about bread anymore." The twins exchanged a look filled with disbelief and fear. Yet, something about Richard's attitude reassured them. They got into the car, and for the first time in a long time, they felt human warmth through the cold street. Along the way, Richard questioned them gently, learning their story, orphaned from a young age, forced to survive on the streets, always together, always supportive. Every word reinforced his conviction, these children deserved more than just a meal or temporary shelter. As night fell, they arrived at a luxurious apartment he had temporarily reserved for them. Emma and Ethan couldn't believe it, a warm bed, soft blankets, clean clothes, it was a waking dream. Richard watched them silently, realizing that this gesture, however simple, was the beginning of an unbreakable bond. He had just realized that sometimes the impossible only required a heart willing to act. But in the shadows, the streets of New York continued to whisper, and some secrets from the twins' past began to emerge. The next morning, Emma and Ethan woke up in an apartment that seemed to belong to another world. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the elegant and warm furnishings. They had never known a place so safe and comfortable. Richard walked quietly into the room, a cup of hot chocolate in hand for each of them. "Have breakfast," he said with a genuine smile. "Afterward, I want you to tell me a little about your life." The twins exchanged a hesitant glance. Talking about their past was never easy. But faced with Richard's kindness, they began to tell their stories, orphaned at the age of 5, separated from their parents in a tragic accident, and forced to survive on the streets without ever complaining about each other. Richard listened intently, his heart aching at every detail. He understood that their strength came from their unbreakable bond and their courage in the face of adversity. But what he didn't yet know was that the twins' past held a secret that could change his perception of the miracle he was creating. Soon after, as he drove them to school, Emma whispered to Ethan, "Do you think he knows who we really are?" Ethan shook his head, worried. At school, the twins were welcomed by sympathetic teachers, but some of the older children began to ask questions. Where did they come from? Why were they so lucky? Emma and Ethan felt the weight of their secret. That evening, Richard, alone in his office, researched their origins. What he discovered made him shudder. The twins weren't just homeless children. They were the indirect heirs of an old, influential New York family, whose fortune had mysteriously disappeared after a scandal. Richard realized that the gesture he had made was not just an act of compassion, but perhaps a turning point in a much larger story, filled with secrets, betrayals, and power. And for the first time, he felt that the miracle he had begun might attract unexpected dangers. In the days that followed, Emma and Ethan's lives finally seemed normal. They attended school, played in the park, and enjoyed hot meals without ever having to worry. But behind this apparent tranquility, shadows from the past began to awaken. Richard, concerned about his discoveries, hired a private investigator to learn more about the twins' mysterious family. He wanted to protect the children, but he felt danger could arise at any moment. One afternoon, as Emma and Ethan were walking home from school, a black car followed them closely through the crowded streets. Ethan immediately sensed danger and grabbed his sister's hand. "Emma, no." They quickened their pace, but the car slowed, keeping them at a distance. The twins finally arrived at the apartment, breathless and heart-pounding. Richard, alerted by a call from the detective, was waiting for them on the doorstep. "What's going on?" he asked, worried. Ethan explained the situation to him, and Richard felt his anger rise. These strangers had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, Richard implemented enhanced security measures, cameras, alarms, and a discreet security detail around the apartment. But he knew it wasn't enough. He had to find out who was trying to get to the twins and why. Meanwhile, the twins, despite their fear, understood that their lives had changed forever. They were no longer alone, but they were beginning to realize that their roots, once ignored, were now keys to understanding the dangers and secrets that surrounded them. And as night fell over Manhattan, Richard stood by his office window, looking out at the city lights. He knew that by saving these children, he had entered into a battle far greater than mere survival on the streets. A battle that would test courage, loyalty, and love in ways he had never imagined. As the weeks passed, Emma and Ethan began to settle into their new lives. They went to school, laughed for the first time in a long time, and felt safe under Richard's protection. But this tranquility was deceptive. One evening, while Richard was working late in his office, the private investigator called him urgently. "Mr. Hamilton, there are individuals actively seeking to find these children. They know their true identities and will stop at nothing." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. He had a feeling this moment would come, but seeing it materialize was terrifying. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice firm. "Members of a once influential family, with much to lose, and much to protect," the detective replied. Meanwhile, Emma and Ethan were playing innocently in the living room when the doorbell rang. A package without a sender had been left on the doorstep. Trembling, they opened it and discovered old photos of their family, secret documents, and an ominous message: "Stay away from your past, or you will regret it." Fear gripped the twins, but Richard arrived at that moment. Seeing the documents, his face hardened. "You're not just in danger on the streets, someone wants to control your legacy, and they know no bounds. But I will protect you, whatever it takes." That night, Richard did more than tighten security. He began planning a strategy to counter those who threatened the children, seeking to transform their fear into strength. Emma and Ethan realized their miracle came with a price, facing powerful and secret enemies. As the city slept, a new silent battle began, a battle where intelligence, courage, and love would be the only weapons capable of saving the twins. A few days after the discovery of the threatening package, tensions rose. Richard had increased security around the apartment, but he knew the twins' enemies were cunning and ready to do anything. One afternoon, while Emma and Ethan were playing in the living room, a loud bang sounded at the front door. Richard, alerted by the silent alarm, rushed over. Before him stood two masked men, determined and menacing. "Stay where you are," Richard shouted, but the men moved forward anyway. Ethan instinctively grabbed his sister's hand and stepped back. But Richard wasn't just another billionaire, he was used to handling crisis situations. With speed and composure, he guided the twins to a secure room and locked the door. The men tried to force their way in, but Richard had anticipated this moment. Security reinforcements, hidden in the building, intervened and subdued the intruders in seconds. The twins, trembling but unharmed, looked at Richard in awe. "You see," he said, taking them in his arms, "nothing and no one will hurt you as long as I'm here." That evening, after the storm had passed, Emma asked timidly, "Why would anyone want to hurt us?" Richard sighed thoughtfully. "Because you have something they want, your inheritance, your rights, and maybe even secrets you don't know yet." Ethan held his sister close, but deep down, a new strength emerged within them, the certainty that, even in the face of danger, they could count on each other, and on Richard. As night enveloped Manhattan, Richard realized that protecting the twins would be a matter not just of resources, but also of courage, strategy, and faith in their incredible resilience. The days following the attack were tense. Richard intensified surveillance and began discreet training for Emma and Ethan, how to protect themselves, stay vigilant, and use their intelligence to avoid danger. But he had no idea the extent to which the twins had already developed extraordinary talents, forged by years of survival on the streets. One afternoon, while they were practicing in the living room, Ethan showed a surprising ability to analyze movement patterns and anticipate Richard's moves during an impromptu defense exercise. "You're quick to pick up on strategies," Richard said, impressed. Emma, for her part, showed an astonishing talent for decryption. She had found an old document left by the twins' family and had begun to spot clues that even private detectives had missed. "Emma, you have a gift," Richard said, amazed. "With you, we can discover the truth about your past." Encouraged, the twins began using these skills to understand who was threatening them and why. They spotted patterns in ancient documents, discovering that certain powerful people wanted to reclaim their family's lost heritage at any cost. This revelation changed their outlook. They were no longer mere victims. They had assets, skills, and intelligence that could help them confront their enemies and regain control of their destiny. Richard, observing their determination, understood that the miracle he had accomplished lay not only in money or security, but in the strength he had enabled the twins to reveal. For the first time, he felt that they might not only survive, but triumph. And in the stillness of the night, New York City seemed to bow to an unexpected alliance: a billionaire, two courageous children, and a family secret capable of upsetting powers far beyond their imagination. A few weeks later, tensions reached a fever pitch. The twins' enemies, determined and well-funded, had finally located their safe haven and were preparing to take action. Richard knew that caution would no longer suffice, action had to be taken. One evening, as rain pounded the streets of Manhattan, a cryptic message arrived on Richard's phone: "Give the children back, or you will suffer the consequences." Emma and Ethan exchanged a determined look. With Richard's training and their own skills, they were ready to defend themselves. "We can't let them win," Ethan whispered. "Together we can do it," Emma replied with conviction. The following night, a group of masked men attempted to enter the building. But Richard and the twins had a strategy in place. Ethan guided Richard to anticipate the intruders' every move, while Emma, using her powers of observation and decoding, spotted flaws in their approach. The enemies were surprised to find themselves facing unexpected resistance. Richard, protected by his reinforcements and the twins' skills, managed to neutralize the intruders without bloodshed. The twins, for their part, realized their strength. Their past of surviving on the streets had given them a stamina and cunning that no one could underestimate. After the confrontation, Richard hugged them. "You were incredible. Not only did you survive, but you also showed that courage and intelligence are more powerful than any threat." The twins, despite their fear and fatigue, understood that this victory was not only physical, but symbolic. They had regained control of their lives and had proven to themselves that they could face any obstacle. But Richard knew this wasn't the end. Their past held even greater secrets, and powers desperate to reclaim what was theirs. After the confrontation, Richard decided it was time for the twins to discover the full truth about their family. He took them to an old secret library belonging to the Hamilton family, where dusty archives, ancient letters, and old photographs were waiting to be explored. Emma leafed through an old ledger and came across a photo that left her speechless, an image of their parents, smiling, surrounded by heirlooms and belongings that had now disappeared. Is it us?" she whispered. Ethan, upon discovering legal documents, realized. "We are the rightful heirs to all this, but someone tried to erase us." Richard explained what he had learned. Their parents had been victims of betrayal within their own family, losing their fortune and influence. The enemies who had attacked them were not unknown. They were part of that corrupt branch, ready to do anything to recover what they considered their due. For the first time, the twins understood the magnitude of their situation. They weren't just children rescued from the streets, they were at the heart of a historical legacy and a complex power struggle. But far from frightening them, this revelation filled them with new strength. "So, we have to get back what's ours," Emma said determinedly. "And we're going to do it together," Ethan added, squeezing his sister's hand. Richard looked at them in admiration. The courage and intelligence they had developed in the streets, combined with this new knowledge, made them a formidable force. That night, in the silent library, an alliance was sealed. Richard and the twins, united by family, courage and destiny, ready to face the last shadows of the past and claim their inheritance. But the final battle was approaching, and with it, even more powerful secrets, capable of changing everyone's lives forever. The day of the final confrontation arrived. Richard, Emma, and Ethan were ready to face the last corrupt members of the family who were trying to seize the twins' inheritance. But this time, they were no longer alone. The evidence collected by Emma, Ethan's strategies, and the discreet support of Richard's influential contacts gave them a decisive advantage. In the headquarters of the old family business, the enemies waited, confident. But as soon as Emma and Ethan presented the legal documents revealing the illegality of their actions, the conspirators' faces paled. Richard, calmly but firmly, declared, "You can no longer manipulate these children. Their legacy is legally and morally protected." The twins, as witnesses to their own righteousness, saw their old enemies capitulate, forced to acknowledge the truth. For the first time, they felt fully free, not only from fear, but also from the shackles of the past. That evening, back in their apartment, Emma and Ethan held hands. "We did it, we really did it," Ethan murmured. "Yes, and this is only the beginning," Emma replied with a smile. Richard looked at them, moved. His act of compassion had not only saved 2 lives, but had also revealed the twins' unsuspected courage and strength. "You are incredible," he said. "Never forget that the impossible can always become possible, as long as you believe in yourself and in those who protect you." From that day on, Emma and Ethan began a new chapter in their lives, with security, education, and above all, the certainty that they could overcome any obstacle. Their past had been dark and painful, but it had also made them invincible. And in the illuminated streets of Manhattan, the winter wind seemed to whisper a message of hope. sometimes the greatest wealth is not in money, but in courage, love, and the strength to change the lives of those who need it most.